Hi, everyone. Welcome to SEG's panel discussion, Women in Leadership, Closing Gender Gaps to Drive Business Success. I'm Austin Hammer, a senior associate with SEG. Today, we're excited to host a discussion that is near and dear to SEG and many others, and one that is increasingly significant. We have the privilege to welcome four incredible leaders in Sue Swenson, Kristina Heinze, Dima Ghawi, and Drew Armstrong to discuss how a gendered diverse workforce can drive high performance in business and ultimately create a more inclusive and open working environment. Our format today is a panel discussion. We'll be asking about 8 preset questions of our panelists, which will take us to a quarter till the top of the hour. If you're inclined to do so, we do welcome attendees to post questions, and we and the panelists will do our best to respond during today's session in the Q&A portion. To do so, please submit using the Zoom app with the Q&A button at the bottom of the app. With that, I'd like to ask our panelists to please turn on your video and make sure you are off mute. It's my pleasure to hand the call off to SEG Vice President, Dima Innabi.
Thank you, Austin, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dima Innabi, and I am Vice President at SEG. I've been with SEG for 7 years, and I'm proud to be a part of an organization that's emphasized closing gender gaps in the workplace, with 40% of our team comprising women. When I started, I knew this wasn't the case in the broader finance and technology industries, but I didn't fully understand the magnitude until I consistently was the only woman at the conference table. Though there has been progress and additional visibility into the issues since then, the gap between women and men in these industries, and especially in leadership positions, is still significant. And over the years, I've more fully understood the immense cultural and economic value of having diverse teams, boards, and executives. We are fortunate to be joined by a group of panelists who have been on the front lines of combating these challenges. These women are groundbreakers, leaders, and forces to be reckoned with. Each has achieved incredible accomplishments in their respective industries while simultaneously making significant strides to close gender gaps in the workplace. We've assembled this panel as we have seen firsthand in our industry, as well as our clients' industries, the benefits of having diverse teams, including driving growth and profitability, attracting investors, strengthening competitiveness for talent and customers, and fostering more innovative workforces. I am humbled and grateful that these trailblazers volunteered their time. So to each of them, and from all of us at SEG, thank you. With that, I would like to introduce our 4 panelists, Sue, Kristina, Dima, and Drew. Ladies, please introduce yourselves in this order, then we will begin today's panel discussion. So Sue, we can start with you. And you're still on mute, Sue.
Here, sorry about that. Good morning, thank you, Diamond, and hello to everybody. As you can see, my bio indicates I spent most of my career in telecom, but what it doesn't, and I had the opportunity to lead amazing teams in that career, but what it doesn't show on my resume is where I started. And I think that made a big difference in my career. I started actually as a service rep at a telecom company. I took many lateral moves and in predominantly female or predominantly male organizations. And as a result of that, I didn't realize at the time what difference that made, but that's my introduction, Diamond.
Great, thank you, Sue. Kristina, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. So I am Kristina Heinze. I am one of the co-founders of ParkerGale Capital. I have been in the finance industry for, dare I say it, 20 years now. What we do is we buy growing, profitable software companies from founders, and we use our operational resources and acquisition experience and resources to basically transform those businesses over our hold period. To me, I think it's the best job in the world. And from a personal standpoint, I have a 6-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter. So between work and that, there is never a dull moment over here. but just really excited to be here. So thank you for letting me participate.
Thank you, Kristina. Dima, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am Dima Ghawi. I'm a leadership consultant and an executive coach. My work is all focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and creating a healthy, safe environment within organizations. My accent is Middle Eastern. I was born in Turkey, raised in Jordan, and I've been in the US for 25 years as of this year.
Thank you, Dima. And Drew, last but not least.
Hi, everyone, and thank you to Diamond and SEG for putting together this panel. I feel like it's been talked about a lot, but you can never talk about this too much, especially until we see the change that we want to see. So I am a JD MBA from the University of Chicago. I started my career in private equity and in management consulting. Most recently, I was the CEO of Grace Hill for 5 years under the Riverside Company and Stone Point Capital. Similar to Kristina, we transformed that business in many ways with the support of our amazing financial partners. I recently transitioned out and I'm soon going to be the CEO of Affinipay, a female-founded market-leading professional services payments company that's also private equity backed. And on top of that, I am a mom and a wife. So I have 2 boys that keep me incredibly tired. They are 6 and 3.
Great. Thank you, Drew. Appreciate it. Thank you, all of our panelists. We can go ahead and get started with the questions here. So the first question is actually for all of our panelists. So we would like you to talk about some positives in your career that you can attribute to your gender or diversity. From your perspective, how does fostering an inclusive and diverse work environment benefit the success of your company? So Drew, let's start with you since we just heard your voice, and then we can go on to the other panelists.
Yeah, so one of the amazing things about transitioning out of Grace Hill was that my number 2, Kendall Pretzer, who is the CEO of the company, succeeded me as CEO. And I think one of the things that, we as women oftentimes are told early in our career is that, women don't work well with other women, right? I think that was some of the lore, right? Is that we're all competing for the same spots. And I think one of the things that I found in the partnership with Kendall was, she brought kind of a very different perspective to leadership. She was kind of a homegrown operator, founder, entrepreneur, and really deep in the industry that we served. And so I felt like, part of me becoming not great, but a decent, good CEO was learning so much from this other woman that I had the opportunity to work with, and then ultimately being able to pass the torch. And I think under our combined leadership, we were able to really evolve from being a company that happened to be diverse and more than 50% female into a company that was purposefully diverse in terms of its culture, its mindset, its business practices. And so I've seen and personally benefited so much from working on diverse teams and really partnering with women in my career.
Great, that's good. Hey, Diamond, from my experience, what I didn't realize was the impact that we as individuals, as women in leadership positions have on other women in the organization. And in every situation where I was the CEO or in a senior leadership position, it was interesting to me the impact that you had as an individual and how it inspired others to maybe take more risk, to take on additional assignments, and the number of people who came up to me and said, you can't believe what a difference it makes to have you in that leadership position. Like the other women on the panel, I tried to have diverse teams, and I think that role modeling was really important, not just for the women in the organization, but for the men in the organization to see that and see the impact that it had. So I think we have more impact in those positions than we often realize.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Sue. Kristina, would you like to go next?
Sure. So similar to you, Diamond, we're just under 40% female at ParkerGale, which I am very proud of. And obviously that is no accident. But I think, we want the best of the best, right? All of us do. And in order to be able to pull that talent from everyone, you want to make them feel comfortable, have an environment where, for example, which is unfortunately not common in private equity, we have maternity leave, we have paternity leave, we have all of these things where we're saying, hey, let's promote this diversity, right? So that, hey, if you want to have a family and have a career, this is a place that you can do both, right? And so that benefits all of us, right? I think from a personal standpoint, as I looked at the question earlier, is like, okay, what are some of the positives in my career that I can, attribute to being a female? In my world, it's so important to source new acquisition opportunities, right? And these founders and CEOs that we're trying to get a hold of, they're getting called by dozens, if not 100 different private equity firms, venture capital firms. And it's funny because I think me being a woman actually helped because I sounded different. I looked different. And so even just to get that phone call answered or the phone call returned, and then obviously it's on me, right? It's on us to do what we have to do and explain why we're the best partner and they should talk to us. But using that, to actually be a benefit, I feel has been important in my career. But yeah, it's so important for us to promote women within ParkerGale. I mean, if you look, right, like you find those people and they're rock stars and you're like, I don't want to lose you, right? So how can we make you feel comfortable again to help ParkerGale be more successful? So that's why I love we're talking about this.
Yeah, that's great, Kristina. Thank you.
In my situation, the positives in my career is that the organizations I worked for before I started my business, they focused on diversity and inclusion. But the biggest part is they did not stand in my way. So many times whenever people think of diversity, they automatically assume, oh, now we have to start promoting talent that are diverse, that may not be as qualified, which is such a horrible bias. It's in my situation, it was the opposite. It's not that I was given an advantage because of my ethnicity and my gender. I did not have people stand in my way and use that as a negative thing to stop me from advancing. So my work ethic, my contribution was what allowed me to continue to advance. And that's so positive.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Dima. Thank you. So the next question, Kristina, this is for you. In a recent study of private equity firms, researchers discovered teams with at least one woman produce an average 12% higher IRR than all male teams. A separate study by McKinsey found that gender diverse boards and executive teams were over 25% more likely to outperform on profitability. In your opinion, how does this dynamic of diverse teams produce these results? And what skills unique to women bolster this? And you started to touch on it a little bit on your last answer, so I'm excited to hear this.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other studies, because I'm all over these. I anytime something new comes up with data that's suggesting this, I dig right in. One of the other things that they've found in multiple studies is failure or the loss of capital. So defined as, less than 1 times your money back, right? For private equity, is also reduced with teams that have at least one woman on them. So wanted to throw that out there. I think, right, it's no surprise that if you have a diverse group of people around the table when you're having these discussions, I see the world different than my partners, right? My life experiences are different. They are. And so if you have everyone looks the same and has experienced life the same, you're not going to make the most efficient decisions. You probably have groupthink. So with having a diverse team, you're more likely for people to say, hey, let's put those biases that you might have aside that I don't have, right? And let's talk about them. So I think it boils down to, again, having a voice that has a different perspective, and you're going to make better decisions, which then in turn leads to all this data on higher IRRs, more profitability, et cetera. I think for women specifically, like what skills do we have? There's also a lot of data and studies have been done. I think women are a little more socially sensitive. We pick up on social cues better, and what that can mean in a group setting. Again, when you're having these discussions or making decisions about investments and and company performance, we may be more apt to say, hey, let's talk about these varying opinions, instead of just not wanting to have that confrontation and not wanting to go there. We actually do bring it up and then have that discussion. It may be uncomfortable. You may not everybody likes it, but again, then that leads to, putting those biases aside and making the more efficient decisions in a debate, standpoint. So yeah, I think that's, again, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know, but that's personally from my experience. I think that is what is leading to the better performance. I'd be interested to hear if other people have thoughts about that too, but.
Could I add to what Kristina is saying? So I think one piece is, I think having women on the team kind of changes how we collaborate.
Yes.
Right. And I'll give you a funny story. So I had one of my male executives, and our company was very diverse. And so sometimes the pain of diversity is you have to help people communicate better together to hear each other. Right. And I said to him, I was like, here's the thing, when women collaborate, we actually expect you to listen to our opinion and take it into account. And so I know you've been going through the motions, but I actually, when I tell you to go talk to these folks who run other departments, I actually want you to listen. And if you end up in a different spot, you need to go back and circle back with them, right? There's this whole kind of how you get people aligned and how you get to the answer, and then how you get people aligned and understanding that answer, right? And so I do think that women can change that dynamic. And then I think the second piece in private equity is, a lot of people rise up in private equity because they're really good at the financial piece and the math piece and the investing piece. But the best investors that I've worked with are also people, right?
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, it's people doing business with people. The best executives, the best leaders are going to have so many options. And I think we're all feeling that really acutely right now, with 40% of Americans thinking they're going to change jobs, right? And so, I think a lot of the returns are the team that's in seat, that are bought in, that are going to kind of push through and find, because business is hard and creating outsized returns is extraordinarily hard. And so you need the best people whose heads are in the game. And so I think that, having gender diversity, both at the private equity level and on the team, right, is going to help you kind of really push through that, get to the best decisions. And I do think the best investors can also see past just a resume versus the person who's truly going to be that exceptional leader for their business, and get them bought in and make them feel supported.
Thank you, Drew. That's a great addition to Kristina's great answer. Thank you. So the next question is actually for you, Drew, and you, Dima. If you can reflect on your career, can you recall any setbacks you may have faced related to gender or diversity? How did you learn from them, and what helped you move forward? Drew, would you like to start, and then we'll hand it off to Dima?
Sure. I was thinking a lot about this question, and there are different types of setbacks that we all face in our careers. And I know Dima is going to talk a little bit about some of the personal ones. I think for me, the ones that are probably the most painful are the ones where you actually internalize the fact that it's harder for you as a woman. Right. And it's, for your identity. Right. And I don't think this is unique to women. I think anyone who's a diverse leader, there have been moments in my career where I've kind of recognized that, the board is being harder on me because I'm a woman. Right. Or I'm up against something greater because I'm a woman. And, you know, one of the hardest things that we have to do is almost compartmentalize our feelings around that in order to kind of continue to push forward, continue to lead, continue to demonstrate, because ultimately, you know, success is what saves you, you know, and performance is what saves you. And so, you know, I look back at times where, you know, kind of selling a company is incredibly challenging. And then you layer on top of the fact that, you know, only, you know, 5 to 7% of CEOs are women, right? And you know that there's going to be this extra level of pressure and support. And so my, you know, my comment to women leaders and to investors who back them is, you know, I think it's the more you can bring it back to the performance and what you're able to do in the business. You know, for me, that's always been a big saving grace. It's honestly part of why I've always been attracted to private equity backed businesses, is that, you know, you have very clear financial goals and kind of metrics that you're trying to achieve. And when you do, it's very hard for folks to challenge whether or not you are the right leader. And so, you know, as I look at some of those setbacks, the other thing that I've learned is we really have a lot of choice when we're a high performing individual in terms of who we choose to work with, right? I think for anyone who is building a career and has built a good track record, you know, you don't have to work with people anymore who aren't willing to kind of, you know, who aren't willing to look at the performance over your identity, right? I mean, they should go hand in hand. It's not a negative. But the nice thing is we don't live in a Mad Men era anymore, right? And so I think the further I go in my career, the pickier I get in terms of the people that I choose to surround myself with and work with. And I think there's a lot of power in that, right? And I think we're seeing big societal shifts around companies that are on the right side of letting people bring their whole selves to work, driving work, you know, work life integration. You know, that becomes a big advantage, right? And I think it's really because top talent is so valuable. And so that's, you know, that's how I've thought about those challenges, where I looked back at that and said, you know, I'm not putting myself in that situation again with those types of people again.
Thank you, Drew. Dima?
In my situation, I don't want to say there hasn't been any professional setbacks. Of course, there are, but I just choose not to allow them to stop me. And I'm very persistent. I have a vision for my life, and I'm not going to let any of these setbacks stop me. Of course, I worked in teams where there were the good old boys club that they support, and they go out and have drinks after work and go golfing. And it was difficult because that's where the decisions are made. And most of the time I was not invited to that. But my focus is not that. The main setback I got is focused on my personal life. I'm a Middle Eastern woman. I grew up in a very small conservative community. There were a lot of expectations of me as a woman. My story was pre-planned on my behalf of I was supposed to grow up, finish high school, just buy time to go to college until I get married, have kids, and then have the same cycle happen again for my children. And throughout the process, a lot of abuse, a lot of putting down, and so that was my setback, the very low confidence, realizing that at that time, thinking that I'm not a leader, that I don't have any abilities, that I'm not good enough, and coming into the workplace with that mentality. Can you imagine how am I going to speak up in meetings if I was programmed to believe that I'm not good enough? How am I going to lead a team if I'm programmed to believe that I'm a follower and not a leader? So that was the major setback, to deal with all of that and to continue to focus on changing my story, changing my own belief system. And I realized a lot of women deal with the same thing, is the fear of making mistakes, the worry of being judged, the aspiration for perfection because of the expectations that were set on us early on in our lives that we're bringing to the workplace. So it's not just the setbacks from the workplace and the challenges we have as we're working in a male-dominating environment. We're coming with our own limitations, our fears, our own insecurities that most of the time they stand in our way and they stop us from advancing.
Thank you, Dima. I can definitely resonate with that. And it's extremely easy to internalize some of the setbacks and limitations that we place on ourselves and are placed on us by others. So thank you for those answers.
Diamond, if I could just add something to that, I think it just demonstrates the importance of what you tell children and how they see themselves. I grew up with an 8-year-old, a brother who was 8 years older than I was, and he made the mistake of telling me I could be anything I wanted, and I believed him. So, it does, I think, Dima, make a difference in terms of what happens when you're younger. And I think that's a real lesson because things stay with you through your entire life.
Definitely. Thank you, Sue. And this next question is actually for you, Sue.
Yeah.
How have you seen industries change over your career as it relates to diversity and inclusion? What areas of inclusion and diversity have you seen improve throughout your career? And what are some areas that still have the most work to do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think what's better is that there's clearly much more awareness of the issue now. I think that has made a ton of progress and focus. What's not better is that we haven't made the progress we'd all like to see. I mean, clearly there's been progress and we've talked about that. I looked at some data this morning, a Women in Tech report, because I come from the technology space, and they asked a question about gender equity. And the responses were women felt that it was 28% better, 58% the same, and 14% worse. Men answering the same question said 41% better, 54% the same, and 5% worse. So interesting. And then asking executives the same question, they said 24% better and 22% worse. So clearly everybody's perspective, has an impact on this. And, I'm not in the active workspace today, but I serve on several boards, and I was involved in the effort that started several years ago called 2020 Women on Boards. And I'm pleased to say that today we've achieved that result. There's 28.8% of US boards are women, have women on their board. So I think that shows the real progress, but it took a lot of effort and focus. The same measurement, the leadership team women in the US is 22.7. So women in leadership positions also has made some progress. And I think investors, I think you've talked about it, Drew and Kristina, investors are taking much more interest in this now and asking a lot of questions about it. But the private companies are still lagging way behind. 11% of board members on private companies are women. It's up from a whopping 7%. But clearly a lot of progress has to be made there. So nearly 50% of the private equity boards are all male. So there has to be, I think, a focus there. Clearly the external efforts with NASDAQ and NYSE, in terms of having requirements is driving that. But I'd also like to mention that there are organizations that are really helpful to women, and particularly maybe for the listeners who may not be aware of two organizations in particular that I'm aware of. One is called the Board List. And it's an organization that helps women find other senior executive positions and board positions. We actually, on one of the boards I sit, use the Board List and have recruited one board member, and we're in the process of doing another through the work through that organization. I also got introduced to a group called Him for Her. And it's an organization that brings a network of people to get people introduced to up and coming women who are eligible for board positions. And I love what they say. They said, the problem isn't the pipeline, it's the network. And so this is really bringing the right people together to get them introduced and get them introduced. So I do think the focus has been great, but I think we have more progress to be made in this particular area. But I'd be interested in what other people think, particularly on the private equity side.
I mean, I think we have made very little progress at the CEO level. We've made very little progress in terms of actual investors, right? So partners at funds. And to your point, the private market where there isn't that public accountability that's being driven also lags, right? So I think there's a ton of work to be done. And I think, the flip side of that is for people who are passionate about change, right? There's a lot of, there's definitely an opportunity here. And I think it's so important that, private equity funds take an interest. They control, the funds that I've both, all the three funds that I've worked closely with, each control more than 20 billion AUM, right? And have, often at times anywhere from 60 to 100 portfolio companies, right? And that's a massive amount of power in terms of boards and CEOs and executives and building that pipeline. And so my encouragement to folks in the private equity world is, I think you guys have a lot of power in the same way that you've driven kind of increased understanding of how to build operational efficiency in your businesses, right? And there's, whole consulting teams inside of different PE funds. I think the next wave of differentiation is going to come around talent. And why not go after the talent that is totally undervalued by the market? Right. And that is the diverse talent pool. And so I think there's real business and competitive advantage that can be built for funds that take an interest and really take action and not just drive conversation.
Yeah, and real quick, just to add to that, because I couldn't agree more with what both of you have said, Sue and Drew. Right. I mean, private equity itself has not done a great job, right? I mean, it's I believe last I checked, it's like 8.7% of senior level at private equity firms are women. And I think that's up from 7% or something, 5 years. So it's not looking terribly great, but you hit on it. We have to make that change, and it takes work. I mean, we could do a whole nother webinar just on trying to find women in that, the funnel, right? So it's like, if you're going after investment bankers, the junior investment bankers or consultants, and Diamond, you guys, I'm sure see this too. We have to work really hard to have built up the team that we have. I've got all kinds of statistics that it's amazing. It's like, one of them is the whole, a man will apply for a job if he's 50% qualified, and a woman, I think the numbers they use are you have to be 120% qualified to even apply, which is just scary. But there are things, so you have to get that talent early on. And then again, how do you retain them? By making everyone feel comfortable and doing what you need to do, which again, it's not just to do it for the right thing, but again, we all talked about why it's the best thing to do. So, but it's hard. We have to go, it's all female recruiters that we use. And even with them, I mean, we have to go into LinkedIn on our own and start pinging people and emailing. I will, right? As a female co-founder, hey, please. And even then it's hard. So it's not the path of least resistance, right? So you have to make it, a priority.
Definitely.
I love what Sue said about it's not the pipeline, it is the network. And this is so powerful because I hear a lot of time from the clients that I work with that want to diversify their team, but they're like, you see, there's nobody Black, there's no women. And it's not the pipeline. It's like, what are they doing to expand their network in order to reach out and to do the work, as Kristina said, to do the work instead of just looking for excuses of, oh, well, we want to promote someone who's a female or someone of color, but there's nobody. And I'm like, okay, so that's the issue. Let's talk about why is this, what created it, and what are you going to do about it? But to them, they're just waiting to look, and suddenly something magically is going to appear, and then and it's not going to work that way. So network is so important, and expanding the network.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, Diamond, having women on boards is really important because we can then hold the executives accountable for these kinds of things. I'll just tell a quick story. I was on the board of another company, a very large company, and the team said we were looking for somebody to come into the senior PR position. And the team said, we can't find a diverse candidate. The CEO said, then I guess we're not going to have a person in that position. I mean, he literally put his foot down and said, then I guess we're not going to hire anybody. And lo and behold, we found a fantastic diverse candidate for the position that served for a number of years. So, the board members can, that's why I think having the women on the boards is so important, because then it trickles down and we can hold executives accountable. So I think it's having that kind of impact. But I love that story because it just shows that you can find the candidates when you put your mind to it.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for all the valuable insights. The next question is for Kristina and Sue. Women deal with a unique set of challenges that men don't, which we have talked about a lot on this panel. Getting and giving mentorship is for emerging women leaders is one of these unique challenges. Can you describe the different styles of mentorship you have received and given over the years?
Go ahead, Kristina, you go first.
Okay, so unfortunately, I didn't have a female mentor, right? Because it just didn't exist when I was moving up the ranks from associate to VP to principal, et cetera. So, but I did have a man who did take under his wing, and he was fantastic. So I just want to, from my experience, it doesn't matter, like as long as you have a mentor, that is going to make all the world of a difference. So I was lucky in that regard. He was a wonderful, wonderful guy. What I have done then differently, because I can, is I work with, for example, my alma mater, University of Illinois. I've got 2 separate programs that I do with, it happens to be female. So mentorships, right? So it's like, a cadence of monthly where you're on Zoom if you're not in person, et cetera, et cetera. So I try to get involved in formal programs as much as I can. I also think it's important. People will email me or they'll call me, right? Because they just go online or they heard, whatever it may be. And we're all busy. I get it. But I make it a point to respond. And again, even if it's just a phone call, even if it's 15 minutes, to set up that time with them, because they took the initiative and went out of their comfort zone to reach out and ask for some kind of help. And again, to me, this is the best job in the world. Like, I can't imagine doing something else. So I'm like, I want to scream it, right? Like, yes, please, if you're interested, do this. There is a spot for you. And so I will always return those phone calls. So on an informal basis, that would be right. The other thing that I think is important, and this goes back to what Sue and Dima, what you guys were talking about at the last question with networks, because there wasn't a lot when I was junior, especially, there wasn't mentors available. Like, we went on our own and sort of created a community, right? So I've got, for example, 5 partners at private equity firms in Chicago who are women who have become such good friends of mine. Not only we collaborate, we help each other, we see the same issues, family, work, etc. But we try to do what we can informally, and then do things like there's an organization called PE Win, Private Equity Women Investor Network, which is fantastic. But yeah, so I think we have to do what we can on our own and take that initiative, in addition to, if you can be a part of formal mentor programs.
Yeah, I like Kristina. I didn't have a mentor. The mentorship I received was to give me more challenging jobs if I survived the last one. Yeah. So it was, okay, great, you survived that one. Let's see if you can handle the next one. I mean, what I learned was they were looking out for me, but there wasn't that formal connection. I mean, they were sort of in the background, and you learn that later in life. So what I've done is have that mentorship, come one, come all, women, diverse candidates, men, whatever. I mean, have an open door about mentoring. And the only thing I ask of people is that they pay it forward. That's the only thing I ask in return, because they're going to be in positions of leadership in the future. I say, look, I'm more than happy to give you my time. But what I ask back in return is that you, when you have the opportunity, be a mentor to somebody else. I also think that, learning about people and creating that kind of environment where people feel comfortable is really important as a leader, to understand that everybody, regardless of their gender or ethnic diversity, is a different person inside that exterior, right? You have different styles. And one of the early insights I got as a leader, thanks to somebody I worked for, is we did, learning about people's styles. And we used the DISC profile just for illustrative purposes. And really understanding, dominant style, influencing style, steady style, conscientious style. You as a leader can then bring out of people and have them feel comfortable but you as the leader have to make that environment uncomfortable. And without that knowledge, it's hard because your dominant style tends to take over. So I think that's really important in terms of working with people and creating that environment. And it's very, I think it's very helpful so that everybody can feel an equal opportunity to participate. But, you know, mentoring, I never had it formal. I do informal, I do formal. I think if, like Kristina said, if people reach out, I make the time. I'm busy as well, but there's nothing more important that we can do is help people achieve what their goals are.
Definitely. Thank you, Sue and Kristina. I have definitely felt that here at SEG, where, you know, managing partner Alan has been that mentor for me. But it's my job and all of our jobs to be that mentor for somebody else. So definitely resonate with both of those answers. Thank you. And the last question we have here before we get into some of the Q&A from the audience is for all of our panelists, and one that I think is going to be very interesting. So what advice would you give to women entrepreneurs currently pursuing a career in a male-dominated field like tech or finance, or looking to move into the C-suite? So let's start with Dima on this one.
So the advice is focus on your vision and not the setbacks. It's easy to look into the setbacks and say, oh, like this is happening, this person is stopping me, and then we're wasting energy. But focus on the vision. Make your vision, your goal so powerful, so much more powerful than the setbacks. So these setbacks would not stop you from continuing to work hard, to build your network, to create allies that would support you throughout your journey. So your vision, focus on the vision.
Love it. Thank you, Dima. Let's go to you next, Drew.
So I think piggybacking off of what Sue and Kristina were talking about, you know, I think the thing that has allowed me to become a CEO of a software company at a relatively young age is having career sponsors, right? And obviously that's earned. And I draw a big distinction between a mentor who can give you advice and wisdom based on their experience, and then a career sponsor who is someone that's actually going to promote you and give you those opportunities. And so for me, you know, and look, that has to be earned, right? But the best leaders that I've worked for selfishly also wanted to be successful themselves and wanted the best team around them. And so, you know, my piece of advice is figure out what you're really good at, right? Strengths-based development. This isn't high school anymore. You don't need to be good at everything. Find your gift, find your passion, and then also put yourself in an environment where people will sponsor you and give you more opportunities. There's also, I would point people to a really good Harvard Business Review article on kind of 3 things that allowed people to accelerate into the CEO role young. And it's, you know, taking a step back, taking a big risk, taking on a big messy transformation, right? So I think there is a certain element of risk and betting on yourself, right? To Dima's point, have a vision and really believe in it and really believe in yourself. But also, you know, I've had many of my, I have a personal board of mentors and sponsors, half of which are men, right? So don't be afraid to find the right person who's going to give you that opportunity, give you that advice, and to really lean on it, lean on them. My experience is the most successful people want to give back. And part of how they measure their own success isn't just monetary or title wise, but is being able to create that next generation of leaders.
Thank you, Drew. Let's go to Sue next.
You know, I really agree with what Drew and Dima have said. I can't tell you how important it is to know what you have conviction about. I was in a position in a job where literally on the first day on the job, I was moved around pretty frequently in the company I was in, and I showed up on the first day and he said, well, tell me about yourself. And I did. And he said, well, you've never worked in this environment before? And I said, no, but I've been around it and I know I can learn it. And he said, well, you're just not going to be successful here. I mean, this is the first day that I met him. And I said, you know, well, it is day one. Could we reserve judgment for a couple of weeks? But I think what that taught me was, and I really resonate, Drew, with what you said about performance. It's really understanding what is success in the environment that you're in, really focus on it, and make it happen, because then opportunities will come to you. Because like you said, people want good people around them that will help them be successful. And I think it's really important. And the last thing I would say is never give up, never, ever give up, and just keep pushing.
Thank you, Sue. Kristina?
Yeah, so echo everything these ladies have said. I'm like jumping out of my chair. It's like, yes, oh my gosh, this is what I say. And a couple things. I get asked this question a lot, and I always point out, if someone is interested in private equity, because that's what I can speak to most, right? I actually don't care if I'm talking to a man or a woman. It actually doesn't matter to me. If you want to get into private equity, be relentless in that pursuit. Someone else said it, like, look out for yourself. I've always said, like, I have no plan Bs, right? Like, if I don't bet on myself, like when we left, we, started our own firm, that's scary, right? Like, had to pay everybody out of our own pockets. My husband stays at home. I was the breadwinner, right? Like, I was pregnant, my second, all those things, but it didn't matter because I knew that I was going to be successful. And that is my advice to people is do whatever you have to do. And you might have to work harder. If you're a woman, maybe I had to do that, and that's okay. But if you want to do it and you're interested, you find a way. And that also includes, don't be afraid to rely on your networks and rely on your friends' networks. And they're, right? Like, always be introducing, right? Every time, I talk to someone, it's like, hey, how can I help you? Right? Instead of just like, what can you do for me? But how can I help you? And just, especially when you're younger and you're a junior person, don't be afraid to use that network as much as you can. Again, just to get your foot in the door, because then you go and be relentless and work as harder than everybody else. Right. And then you'll get it done. That's my advice. But again, that's it, whatever you are, doesn't matter.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Kristina.
Yep.
So I think we have time for one or two questions from the audience. Maybe we can keep these answers brief so we can get through both of them. So the first question is for you, Dima. With your work as an executive coach, I think this would be very helpful for you to answer. So when hiring teams, how do you achieve your DE&I metrics of employees without making the new hire feel like they are the quote unquote token hires, and ensuring your team doesn't feel like they are the token hire?
Wow, what a good question. The first thing they need to do is increase awareness internally. If the organization already has a lot of discrimination and issues, and then you bring a diverse talent, then of course they're going to think this way. So first is to educate the team, to ensure that they understand their biases, to ensure that they understand the value of diversity and inclusion. That's the first one. The other thing is to, whenever we're hiring individuals and whatever we're having a talent pipeline for advancement, to focus on having them diverse. So we're not just going to bring everybody now that are women and everybody that are from a specific race, to ensure that we are having a group of diverse candidates that we are focused on, but also to work with the management team. So whenever there is gossip like this or complaints, so the managers are able to address it. Because a lot of managers that I work with, they're not comfortable with conflict, and they're not comfortable to know what to say and how to address these issues. So to work with the managers, to train them on how to deal with it. Because even though, of course, I love diversity and inclusion, that's what I do for a living, but many times when we start implementing these initiatives, the resistance is so high, and it is internally, where now a lot of people start saying, oh, now we have reverse discrimination, or now I have to worry about being politically correct. The only way we address that is with training and with increasing awareness.
And when you hire the right candidate, it becomes less and less of an issue. When you hire the right candidate, that first person is going to have to create the breakthrough. And then when they perform as you expect, I think it starts to resolve itself. Yeah. I've seen that too.
Definitely. Thank you. And I believe we have time for one more question, and this could really be addressed by any one of you. It's a bit of a heavy question that could take an entire webinar to answer, but we'll try it. If the strategy of managing diversity for improved results is objective, what are some of the actionable plans that can be implemented to establish the traction of demonstrated benefit?
Oh, wow. That's,
Right.
can you repeat it again? That sounds so deep.
I feel like I'm taking a test.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I'm lost. I need my dictionary. Okay, more time.
I mean, are they asking, how do we prove that when you increase diversity on a team that the team performs better? Like, how do you actually measure that within a company versus most of the, like the data is looking cross cohort, right? So when you say like these funds or these companies outperform their peer set, you know, and there's a lot of data that shows diverse teams outperform, but you can only do it relative. And your question is kind of, if I were to take a non-diverse team and make it diverse, how could I measure and attribute that to diversity versus many other things, right?
Yes, I believe that's what they are asking in this question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
So there's one of my mentors is this woman, Lori Lepler, and her team did the global BCG Women's Initiative. And BCG identified, I think a lot of this is just good strategy questions around talent, which is like, hey, I'm looking at my talent pipeline and people are, you know, I don't have enough diversity at the bottom, the middle, the top, maybe all of the above. And BCG is a big pyramid, it's management consulting, and they had a lot of women attriting in the middle, which is obviously problematic because those are the people that you most likely want to make partner. And the initial hypothesis was like, oh, they all go off and have babies, right? But hey, maybe it's something else. And when we talk to them, it's not just that because they keep taking jobs elsewhere, like what's really going on. And the long and the short of it was they kind of went in and diagnosed kind of 3 different levers that they could pull to improve kind of their retention of women and their satisfaction of women. But what I loved about that, and there's a really good Harvard Business Review article summarizing it, is it actually improved the experience of progressing through the talent pipeline for all candidates within BCG, right? So across the board, men and women said that they felt, you know, kind of more satisfied, were more likely to stay, felt more appreciated. And so if you really think that competitive differentiation is partially driven by your talent strategy, right? Your ability to attract, retain, and promote great talent, I do think looking at those metrics and saying, if we embrace DE&I, right, and we really start to drive diversity, which is not the idea that like we're doing it for its own sake, but also that then you get these underappreciated candidates. It's the whole, there's all the data around how they did auditions, right? And you're missing the best violinist if you see them versus if you listen to them, right? And so it's actually our biases hold us back. And so I do think there's, you may not say, oh gosh, that company grew, you know, 10% this year instead of 5 just because they added some women. But I do think in a lot of your talent metrics, you can look for wholesale improvement, right? And you can look for meaningful gains in terms of retention and ability to develop talent in-house if you embrace kind of a better DE&I strategy around your talent that you could directly attribute, right?
Right. Definitely. Thank you, Drew. And I wish we could keep going for hours and hours, but we're coming up on time. So thank you so much for all the responses. And thank you to all of our panelists for their time today. And of course, thank you to all of our guests. We hope you found this session to be helpful. I'd now like to turn it over to my colleague, Austin Hammer, for some closing comments.
A special thanks again to the panelists. Your passion is inspiring, and we are so grateful to be able to learn from your hard work and experience. I want to extend our gratitude to the attendees as well. Thank you for joining, and we hope you leave today more educated and aware of ways you can contribute to drive progress and as inspired as we are. We will be sending a form to submit any additional questions, and we'll do our best to answer those promptly. Thanks again, and everyone have a wonderful rest of the week.